Good day and welcome. I'm Rick, a man of history and your guide to the past. Today we're venturing back to the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, stepping on to the early modern battlefield. If you're not familiar with the period or its soldiers, please have a look at one of my previous videos, or if you're already prepared, join me today as we look at how soldiers were organised and how they fought as groups rather than as individuals during the 17th century. But first, a quick aside. The 17th century was a really intense period of warfare in Europe, second only to the 16th and 18th. Geoffrey Palmer, a historian, worked out there were only 4 years without major conflicts involving nation states or just states or just sides in a civil war, because there were civil wars not just in Britain and in Ireland but elsewhere on the continent too. All of this means if you're considering other European wars or interested in other European wars, particularly the long wars of the late 16th century, the early mid-17th century, I'm thinking particularly about the 30 Years' War and the 80 Years' War, where everything that I'm talking about today is broadly true and applicable elsewhere. The 30 Years' War, the 80 Years' War, where many of the famous fighting men of the Wars of the Three Kingdoms got their experience of war. It's where the arms and armour, the tactics and organisational structures, the tools and techniques which were used in England and in Ireland and Scotland and in Wales, it's where they were developed and advanced. And these same organisation, tactics, tools were then used in the Anglo-Dutch Wars and so on. So if you're English speaking and interested in warfare in Europe more generally, looking at how the Bishops' Wars, the Irish Revolts, the Irish Confederate Wars, the English Civil Wars were fought will give you insight into some of the fighting on the continent more generally. So today we're looking at how our armies were organised and fought in battles, particularly large field battles during the English Civil War. But enough from me, time to speak to an expert. Good day. There are, broadly speaking, 3 types of soldiers who make up an army: foot, horse and guns. They've been discussed with you in length already, but to remind you, foot make up the majority of most forces. They're made up of pikemen, sometimes armoured but carrying long spears which can be 16 or even 18 feet in length, and musketeers or shot, who wear no armour but who carry a musket, a firearm capable of shooting a ball the size of, well, the end of a man's thumb, up to 200 yards, and which can be lethal at 50 or 100 yards. These are sometimes reinforced with guns, with cannon, which shoot much bigger balls, sized anything between a plum and a man's head. And then there are horse, cavalry, which are broadly divided between men wearing armour and carrying swords, pistols and carbines, short muskets, men called arquebusiers, and dragoons, who are musketeers who ride horses and deploy quickly. The Scots also make use of lancers, who carry spears and wear less armour, but also ride smaller horses, and there are also cuirassiers, heavily armoured horsemen, but there are very few of those to be found. How do foot, horse and guns fight together on the battlefield? Well, broadly speaking, there are 2 approaches to organising an army. The Spanish used tercios, the Tercio Español, which simply means Spanish third, and it originated in the last century, but is still used by the armies of the Spanish Habsburgs and by others on the continent too. The Dutch and Swedish use a different system, a system of divisions or bodies of pike with sleeves of shot. Traditionally, a tercio comprises 3,000 soldiers in 10 or 12 companies, split into smaller divisions within each company of 30 men, and organised into 3 different types of soldier: pike, shot and sword. In practice, most tercios have between 1,000 and 2,000 fighting men, with effort being made to maintain a core of veterans and gentry and lesser aristocracy to provide leadership and discipline. By the time of the wars in Germany and the Low Country, swordsmen armed with sword and with buckler, small shield, have largely been left out, but not entirely. And the arquebuses, which initially the shot were armed with, have been replaced by muskets, matchlock muskets, such as you may be familiar with. They form 10 or 12 companies, between 200 and 300 men, most commonly 250 to 280, divided unequally between pike and musket, normally with more pikes than musket, which are then divided down into smaller divisions of those 30 men for organisation and tactical flexibility on the battlefield. This make for a potent fighting force and formation. On the battlefield, they tend to form so-called Spanish squares, a checkerboard of those 30 men within the companies which make up the larger tercio as a whole. But these Spanish squares allow for mutual support, tactical flexibility. Each tercio is divided into 3 commands, those 3 thirds. Each is often given its own field artillery, making a tercio in effect a small independent army, but one which can work very well and be joined very easily by other tercios, whilst being able to fight effectively on its own. The Spanish may have the greatest empire in Europe, but they are not the only ones to have great armies. In their resistance to the Catholic Habsburg, the Dutch raised great defences. They flooded large parts of their own land, and they formed a great army. Prince Maurice of Nassau reformed and changed how they fought. Dutch foot are formed into divisions of pike with sleeves of shot. Firepower, not combined arms, is how he fought. So rather than massing soldiers into squares of sword and pike and guns, they have a hard centre of armoured pikemen with long, thin sleeves of shot, wings of shot. The front rank of that shot will shoot. They will give fire, and then they withdraw to the back of the formation to start the loading process. That reveals another rank already aimed, already loaded, which can take aim and fire, and then withdraw to the back to start their reloading, revealing a third rank which is already loaded, ready to fire, and so on. But the only issue with this is it means they are always stepping back. But mass firepower is useful, and much of the Dutch fighting is relatively static behind earthworks and field fortifications. They mass firepower, meaning that more shot is being directed at the enemy because they are in long, thin formations. The Swedish king, Gustavus Adolphus, another Protestant general, refined the Dutch system though. So the front rank steps on. They come forward rather than backwards. The front rank shoots, withdraws to the back, but the entire formation moves forward as they do so. This means that they come onwards rather than backwards. No more do they give ground as they shoot. Instead, they can march inexorably forward. Moreover, Adolphus reinforces infantry battalions with their own cannon. Light field guns, notably leather guns, whose barrels are wrapped in leather to improve their longevity, to increase their rate of fire, and keep the gun light enough that a small crew can move it around the battlefield, further increasing the range, the firepower, and the volume and type of fire that the infantry can provide. Which is better, the Spanish third or the Dutch-Swedish systems? Well, if you examine news from Germany, you'll see that the more disciplined, more experienced, better equipped, and higher morale side is likely to prevail. Assuming numbers are broadly equal, the side with the best morale and most experience is likely to win. Quality of troops, rather than how they are formed, is the important factor. However, most officers and veterans with experience of fighting on the continent fought as part of the Protestant armies of the Dutch Republic, of Sweden, or of the various imperial German states. Moreover, the most popular instructional pamphlets, military manuals, are inspired by Protestant rather than Catholic armies and victories, at least in England, Scotland and Wales. So it should be little surprise that in Britain it's the Swedish system that is largely employed. All of which begs the question of how armies fight during these unhappy wars, and the answer is relatively simple. Armies generally form with their infantry in the centre, deployed in a checkerboard with hard centres and sleeves of shot. The foot is in the centre and it faces the foot of the other army, and the foot will engage each other, bringing pike forward, though few are really keen to engage at push of pike because a relatively slow moving hedge of points coming at broadly chest or face height is enough to test the backbone of the most courageous, and often one side or the other will back away before contact is made. Shot engages, it marches with that pike, And it often engages at relatively short range, even though the range of a musket could be 200 yards or more. They often open fire between 50 and 100 yards, directing fire with sometimes devastating effect against both shot and pike. Each side struggles, aiming to disorder and drive away the enemy to claim and hold that centre ground. The centre is reinforced with cannon, with guns, if they are present. The biggest guns are hugely powerful, can send a ball the size of a man's head many hundreds of yards, spinning and plunging through a rank or more of men, causing enormous distress. But the biggest guns are heavy and cannot easily move, and certainly cannot be easily moved by men alone. Smaller guns are much easier to move, and the smallest guns are battalion pieces, designed to be moved by their crew to support foot at relatively short range and to send a ball the size of a plum a few hundred yards, yet lethal enough to penetrate armour and to go through more than one enemy. At the flanks is the cavalry fight. Horse, usually lightly armoured harquebusier, but heavily armoured cuirassiers if available, sometimes even dragoons, or the spear-armed Scottish lancers, will face off and challenge each other. Their aim is to drive away the enemy, something that Prince Rupert's cavalry are very skilled at, before reforming to join the infantry fight at the centre, coming in at the sides, at the flank and at the rear, something Prince Rupert's cavalry are less skilled at. Rupert's horse tend to high spirits, and a victory on the flanks often sees them plunging after fleeing parliamentary horse or falling on parliamentary baggage. Parliament's horse, and notably the Ironsides of Colonel Cromwell, have much better discipline. They're more likely to reform even after they've been sent fleeing from the field and able to return to the fight. The force with cavalry in the field is at a great advantage. And it is always best to find yourself with every advantage if you wish to win, or simply to survive battle. Well, regardless of how the army is organised, I can't say I fancy actually stepping on to the early modern 17th century battlefield. But I do miss the taste and smell of gunpowder, and it's fun to be found on the reenactment field. So if you find the period interesting and you're in Britain and you come to a reenactment event, it might just be that you'll spot me in a field sometime, possibly in the relatively near future, and that is something we're all looking forward to. But this was just a very quick look at how armies were organised and how they fought. So if you've an interest in a specific battle or commander or other element of fighting and warfare in the mid-17th century in Britain or in Ireland or on the continent, well, say so in the comments and I might make a video to address that, or I might just be able to give you some more information. As always, if there's another part of our shared past that interests you, or a topic or a theme you'd like me to address, please tell me in the comments below and I'll see what I can do. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram. Meanwhile, if you like this video, please like it. If you found it interesting, please share it. And if you'd like to join me again in the past, please subscribe for more. So until next time, stay safe, stay happy, and I'll see you soon. Farewell.